Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this 22nd of January. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that easily by phone or online. The phone number is always 1-800-472-0391. That is the Alaska Weather Information Line. As you call that, listen to the weather prompts for your location, for forecasts and warning information. Write those numbers down, and it'll take you a lot less time to get through those prompts the next time around. Online, our address is weather.gov/Alaska, and you can always substitute in Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage for that Alaska part, and that'll get you to your local forecast information a lot faster there. One more click on the map gets you to your region, and yet one more click will take you to your pinpoint forecast for your part of Alaska, and you can always move the map around and get right to the street or city where you need to be. If you can't find what you're looking for, please let me know. david.snyder@noaa.gov. And I should also say it is my privilege to continue to introduce new people to the Alaska Weather Show. Eric Holloway will be joining us for the aviation and, of course, the marine section just a little bit later on. So thank you all to welcome Eric, and certainly thank you for all of you who have provided comments for Eric as he is joining the Alaska Weather Show from the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. That's probably where you may know him from. As we look at southeast, we have winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up in the north. The warnings are for Skagway and Haines and the Klondike Highway. Winter weather advisories for the capital city and around the Douglas Island region points south. This is mainly for tomorrow afternoon and into the evening and overnight hours as we head on into Friday. We've already had a little bit of snow in northern parts of southeast. Another round of warm and wet air is moving through now, but as we head into tomorrow and that meets up with colder air dropping in from the north, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good setup for another round of snow. Places like Skagway, for example, could be talking about 10 to 16 inches of new snow in the area. The Klondike Highway, probably some more, and the capital city, not so much. 3 to 5 inches is there for that advisory area around the Juneau and Douglas Island areas. So winter weather advisory starting tomorrow afternoon for Juneau and the surrounding area. Winter storm warning for Skagway, for Haines, and the Klondike Highway as we get into the afternoon, evening, and overnight hours for tomorrow. Southwest, totally different story. This is not wet air. This is not a storm. This is just cold and wind coming together. A wind chill advisory going into effect for southwestern Alaska tomorrow night and into the next couple nights, probably to take you into the weekend at least. It looks like wind chill values there. What it feels like when that cold air is blowing on your skin could drop to about 45 below or worse. So a good practice to know where everyone's going. If you've got travelers between villages there, make sure you've got extra gear in case you get stuck, and make sure that you have someone that knows that you're coming there and knows where you're going in case something takes you just a little bit longer. We can send out the rescue folks to make sure that you are safe and okay, because it is going to be cold. As we get into southeast, take a look at the moisture moving over southeastern Alaska. This area of low pressure here is pretty much parked right in the region. We've got another low that's going to come up right behind it and reinforce that moisture, reinforce that lift with the fronts coming through, and that should really help to drive in more rain in the south and more snow and cold in the north. Across south central today, we've had another disturbance working in from south to north. That has also brought in a little bit of light snow. Many areas around the Anchorage region up into the valleys, we're looking at about 3.5 inches of snow or so. We've got a cloud cover up across the north. A lot of dry and cold air here across the Bering, and then we get back into a low pressure system out across the western chain that is really turning into a deep area of storm activity there, about 959 millibars as of last check. Here's a look at the view one more time. You can see that low working its way northward across southeast. That has brought in some more cold air across parts of west and southwestern Alaska. That's really going to be the trend as we get into the next several days here, as high pressure expands its reach across the north, pushes southward with more cold, and then digs in. It could be maybe another week or so, perhaps even longer, where that cold air really starts to retreat and back out of the interior parts of Alaska. But it is winter. Out across the west, low pressure making its appearance there across the North Pacific and heading for the Aleutians. Once again, around 959 millibars. It does look like we'll have some stronger winds working through Adak and Shemya and parts of west and southwestern sections of the Bering as we get into your afternoon. Low pressure then sitting across the northern Gulf. Snow showers expected to continue here and there across some of the higher terrain. The big story is the cold coming up across the Bering Strait. That's pushing southward. Low pressure across the central and western chain, reflecting the precipitation coming in at 959 millibars, and that is continuing to strengthen. Out across the eastern Gulf, 983 millibar low there. One of the earlier disturbances here, already sitting across southeast, is bringing in some areas of light rain, snow to some parts of the northern panhandle. Most of the capital city and southward has already switched over to rainfall, but it looks like as this moves northward, it will pull in a little bit of that colder air, and you can see that happening later tonight. That change should help initiate a better chance of snow across the northern panhandle, Haines, Skagway down to Juneau, with the heaviest snowfall likely occurring around the Klondike Highway, Haines, and Skagway. Skagway looking at as much as 10 to 16 inches of snow. Now across the interior, at 1,016 millibars, you can see some areas of low clouds and maybe some snowfall there. Most of that on the north side of the Alaska range. And then out across southwest, you can see cold air pushing its way west and southwest. Low pressure working into the North Pacific at 966 millibars, and across the chain, some rain and snow there. Out across the western end of the chain, it is all snow, and all of that is just a sign that we've got enough cold air coming out of this high pressure system across the interior, working its way into the western Bering Sea. And again, some of that will be pushing its way southward through the Yukon. So this entire area across Alaska in the west and then slowly working its way into the east will be due to that expansive area of cold Arctic air that is taking over the state again as we head into Thursday and Friday. By Thursday, though, the focus will be that high-pressure system west of the Bering Strait at 1,030 millibars. A northerly flow will pretty much rule the roost for all of the west coast, and that combined with wind will lower that feels-like value, what it really feels like when that cold air is blowing across your skin and removing that layer of warm air on your skin. Could be as cold as 45 below, maybe even colder where you are across southwestern Alaska. So once again, travel safely and plan to arrive safely by letting people know what your plans are when you're moving around and making sure you're prepared just in case things get stuck. As you see in the east, though, weather will be fairly unsettled across the panhandle and not the cold, dry air that we're talking about. In fact, temperatures here will be hovering in the 30s, it looks like, maybe even warming up into the 40s for a brief time before that wet air moves in. And conditions will be changing quite a bit across the central and southern parts of southeast. That looks like primarily rainfall, but north of, say, Petersburg and Wrangell all the way up into the northern part of the panhandle, it looks like you've got a good chance of snow. And so from Thursday afternoon on into Friday, snow will be falling around the capital city, and northward it could snow a lot. Haines and Skyway and the Klondike Highway looking at about 10 to 16 inches there. That low pressure system pulls back to the west at 988 millibars. It will be keeping a lot of wind across the northern Gulf, keeping snow from Yakutat points westward, maybe into Prince William Sound. But Cook Inlet, South Central, and most of the Matanuska and Susitna Valley is probably dealing with more wind than snow at this point. That also means wind chills could be a factor, not as much as what we'll see across the west. But it looks like a very cold and blustery period there, and much colder, in fact, than it has been for a couple days. Up north, high pressure sitting around the Chukchi Sea at 1,036 millibars there is the anchor for all of this. Out to the west, low pressure tries to dig in but is weakening at 973 millibars, stretching an occlusion out across the west. Winds will be coming up across the western Bering if you've got family or friends fishing out in that general direction. Let's take a look at temperatures here since this is a big factor. For southeast, temps hold around the 30s to about 40 degrees for early tomorrow morning. South central, single digits, even colder there as you head down the Kenai Peninsula and the Sterling Highway. The middle Tanana Valley points west anywhere from 10 to 20 below, 26 below for Fort Yukon, 5 to 15 below for the North Slope. Nome 5 below southwest, looking at 5 to 15 below. St. Paul and St. George around 20 above, teens and 20s for southwest. By Thursday afternoon, look for temps anywhere from 10 to 15 below all the way out toward McGrath. Fort Yukon still has you beat, though, at 20 to 25 below. Southeast, looking at temps in the 40s. The North Slope, 5 to 15 below. As you get into Friday morning, look for temps to cool off in the middle Tanana Valley, anywhere from 10 to 20 below as you head down the highway toward Healy. Prince William Sound looking at temps around 10 degrees, 30s for southeast. The North Slope 15 to 25 below. Nome, Kotzebue, Shishmaref all holding at 10 to 15 below. Southwest and Bristol Bay 5 to 10 below, 20 above for St. Paul and St. George, teens and 20s for the Chain, the Alaska Peninsula, Unalaska and Dutch Harbor around 26. Friday afternoon, not much of a warm-up at all. In fact, temps holding around 10 below for Fairbanks. Ambler, Bettles looking at 25 below, 22 below in Arctic Village, 15 to 20 below in the North Slope. Southeast holding at temps in the 30s and 40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Tomorrow's flying weather looks like this. Thursday morning, we're going to be looking at marginal VFR conditions across southeast, the Panhandle with a low pressure system in the area. We're going to have scattered marginal to IFR conditions over much of the west, and with another low pressure system, marginal to IFR conditions there across the western Aleutians. Much the same story for Thursday. Again, that low pressure system in the Aleutians will cause deteriorating conditions across there. A little bit of low visibilities and ceilings across the North Slope, portions of the interior, and again down through the southeast with that low pressure system. Friday morning, again, we're going to be looking at southeast with IFR conditions with that low pressure system moving further inland. IFR to marginal VFR conditions across much of the interior, the Yukon Valley, Tanana Valley, and again out on the North Slope and down through the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians. For Friday, again, much the same conditions with the interior locations, Yukon Valley, Tanana Valley, North Slope, marginal to IFR conditions, scattered conditions, probably improving by Friday afternoon across portions of the southeast, marginal conditions across the Gulf, and IFR conditions there showing up in Kodiak Island. And again, with that low pressure system still hanging around the Aleutians, marginal to IFR conditions there. For past conditions, again, we looked at some lower visibilities and ceilings across the North Slope. We're going to be looking at marginal conditions on the north entrance of Anaktuvik and Atikan, otherwise VFR conditions. For many of the passes in the Alaska range, we're going to be looking at marginal conditions as the west or north entrances, but otherwise VFR conditions for Lake Clark and Rainy. VFR, and then again, marginal conditions in the west entrance there on Thursday again. For windy, much the same. VFR otherwise marginal in the north side of that pass. And then Isabel with VFR conditions as you move farther to the east. And Mentasta VFR conditions. Tanita, much the same there. Portage, VFR. I did put in a little bit of marginal conditions out in the Cook Inlet. We'll see how that plays out. And again, with that low pressure system, we're going to be looking at marginal to IFR conditions there in the passes in the southeast Panhandle. Freezing levels, you can see that elevated freezing levels across the southeast with 2,000 to 4,000 feet. Surface conditions starting along the coastal range, move out into the North Gulf Coast and then down into the Gulf region and across the eastern Aleutians and out into the Bering. For icing conditions, below 4,000 feet over much of the southeast with isolated moderate with considerable moderate scattered throughout the southeast, and again with that low pressure system above 5,000 feet, icing conditions out that way. Jet stream, pretty strong jet coming across the Pacific this morning, or for Thursday, I'm sorry, analyzed this morning with 160 knot winds there as you approach the west coast, 100 knots there, but again with this ridge over the Alaska Peninsula, 75 to 90 knots coming down the front side of that ridge, again with that low pressure system over the portion of the mainland, a 60 knot jet stream moving through along the border there. The winds at 9,000 feet for Thursday. Again, pretty weak across the mainland. Low pressures over the south central. Southeast is going to be 30 30 to 45 knots in that region. On the front side of this ridge, 20 to 40 knots there, but the higher conditions are going to be out here in the Aleutians with 40 to 50 knots out that way. And for 3,000 feet, again, low pressure system in the area. 5 pretty weak winds across the interior, 20 knots with this ridge across the Alaska Panhandle, and then there's that low out there in the Aleutians. For turbulence, I went for below 2,000 feet across many of the Aleutians, and below 4,000 feet, 3,000 feet here near Kodiak, and below 4,000 feet in southeast.
It used to be that you could only warn one person about a tornado after it had already blown down someone else's barn.
Now, on average, we're able to issue a tornado warning 15 minutes before the tornado's even there, and that wouldn't be happening without Doppler radar.
This NexRad system has reduced fatalities on the order of 45% due to tornadoes since its advent.
We have a lot more information now about storms and being able to understand how they develop, how they produce severe weather, and how that information might be used to improve warnings for our National Weather Service partners.
The lab is unique in that we serve the nation by supporting the National Weather Service in its mission to protect lives and safe property by improving the accuracy and the lead time of severe weather warnings.
We have a legacy of radar research and converting existing technology from military to weather purposes.
A recycled Doppler radar led to the development of NexRad, installed nationwide in the early 90s. It allowed forecasters to see storms like never before.
Not only did we help bring that technology to the National Weather Service and to help protect lives and property, but we have continued to upgrade that technology, keep it relevant, and keep it state-of-the-art.
Recently, a major upgrade was added. Dual polarization technology takes the radar from 2D to 3D. Forecasters now know more about what type of precipitation is falling, which is very helpful during winter storms, as well as how much rain is accumulating, resulting in better flash flood warnings. The radar can also detect and track tornadoes based on debris. Looking to the future, the National Severe Storms Lab is testing the capabilities of phased array radar. Originally used by the U.S. Navy, the antenna scans the skies electronically rather than mechanically, allowing the radar to focus on a storm.
With current technology, we get a full picture or image of what is going on within a storm every 4 to 5 minutes. So it's more like a snapshot. Whereas with phased array radar, we get that picture of what's going on in the storm every minute. So it becomes more like watching a movie. So we can do adaptive, rapid scanning on the storms that matter most, being able to provide the information that's most relevant when and where it's happening.
Another advantage of phased array radar is its multifunction capability, providing weather and air traffic information simultaneously.
Number one, it is a system that promises to replace and expand upon the existing weather surveillance radars. Secondly, to replace aging air traffic surveillance radars. And number three, it offers the potential application to meet Department of Homeland Security and defense requirements for identifying and tracking non-cooperative aircraft. With the replacement of all these various radars with a single system, the American taxpayer could realize substantial savings in cost.
You have a lot fewer radars to maintain, and the electronic capability of this also reduces maintenance costs because you do not have moving parts.
Not too long ago, the ability to predict severe weather was thought to be impossible. During the past several decades, research conducted at the National Severe Storms Lab has developed life-saving tools like Doppler radar. We've progressed from no warning of threatening weather to about a 15-minute lead time, and current research promises to extend that much further.
Our knowledge of severe storms and how they behave, and our use and ability to use the Doppler radar technology is in a lot of cases a direct result of that close working relationship, that research to operations component that we get between the National Severe Storms Laboratory and a forecast office.
That history and understanding of how these data can be used by our users and doing the research to help advance the use of radar technology, really it's what we live for, it's in our lifeblood, it's in our history.
It's now easier than ever to be a part of weather research. We just launched the mPing app for both iPhone and Android users, and it's totally free. PING, which stands for Precipitation Identification Near the Ground, is a research project by the NOAA National Severe Storms Lab and the University of Oklahoma. With the mobile app, you can send us your weather observations on the go. Are snowflakes falling on your head? Is hail hitting your car? Just select what type of precipitation is falling and press submit. It's that easy. It takes about 5 seconds and it's anonymous. Reports can then be viewed online. Our scientists will compare your report with what the radar has detected. This helps us develop new radar technologies and techniques. Download the app today, share your reports, and let's work together to make our nation weather ready. Learn more here and follow us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Analyzed by our sea ice desk today, you can see that the pack ice is slowly heading south, southwest, closer to St. Matthew Island. Also expect some filling in there at Bristol Bay. We also have a pretty extensive ice through the Cook Inlet region. Thursday's marine forecast for inside waters, looking at generally south to southwesterly winds through much of the southern and central inside waters, with gusts of 40 knots there in Stevens Passage over the northern inside waters, Lynn Canal, northwesterly at 15 knots. Out on the outside waters, winds generally from the southeast and the south side, or southwest from the south side of the Gulf region, 25 knots of seas as high as 12 feet. As you get into the northeast part of the Gulf there, winds generally from the west at 15 knots. For Friday, winds come down a little bit, still out of the south to southeast at 25 to 15 knots. Outside waters along the Gulf, winds generally as high as 20 knots from the southwest or west, with seas as high as 12 feet. For South Central Thursday, looking at generally winds from the northwest at 20 to 35 knots out along the Gulf. Small craft advisories there for just east of the Barren Islands. And then through the Cook Inlet, we're going to be looking at winds generally from the north, 10 to 20, with 45 near storm force winds there in the southern part of the Cook Inlet, with seas as high as 11 feet. For Friday, from the north Gulf Coast, we're going to be looking at winds generally from the north to northeast at 15 to 25, with 35 knots there near the Barren Islands. In the Cook Inlet, we're looking at 10 to 20 with 30 knots in the southern part near the Barren Island, Kamishak Bay area, seas as high as 8 feet. For Thursday's forecast for the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, generally looking at winds from the northwest from 30 to 40 knots, especially there in Shelkoff Strait, with winds generally from the north to northeast at 20 knots, with seas as high as 9 feet as you get out into the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. For Friday, looking at winds generally from the north or northwest at 25 to 35, seas as high as 12 feet in this region. All along the Alaska Peninsula, winds generally from the north or northeast at 25 knots, seas as high as 11 feet on the south side. Bristol Bay region from the north at 20 knots. For Thursday forecast for Aleutian Chain, looking at generally easterly winds up to 50 knots with seas as high as 30 feet here near Atka and Adak, and out along the western part of the Aleutians, generally from the east at 45 to 50 with seas as high as 31 feet there. And for Friday, Aleutian Chain, again, easterly winds 30 to 40 knots and 45 knots here on the south side or north side of the Aleutians, with seas as high as 21 feet there on the south side of the Aleutians and 22 feet on the north side there, just north of Adak. For Thursday's forecast, west coast, we're going to be looking at winds generally from the north along the pack ice, 15 to 20 knots. Out ahead of the pack ice, winds generally from the east at 20 to 25 knots, seas as high as 8 feet. For Friday, generally looking at winds from the north to northeast at 20 to 25 knots, 15 knots there in Norton Sound. Out ahead of that pack ice, winds generally from the east, 35 to 40 with seas as high as 17 feet. And Arctic coast, Beaufort Sea, north coast, looking at 15 to 20 knots from the west and down along the Bering Strait, winds generally from the northeast at 10 to 20 knots. And for Friday, again, out along the North Arctic coast, we're looking at winds generally from the west at 15 to 20 knots. Down through the Bering Strait, 15 to 20, generally out of the northerly direction. For tonight's weather, we're going to be looking at a pretty good low pressure system here in southeast Alaska with an occluder frontal band producing a mixed band of precipitation across much of the panhandle. Also low clouds and some snow showers through the interior with that high pressure. And along this front, some scattered snow showers, and again, that big low pressure system out in Aleutians with mixed precipitation out that way.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.